Okay, we're excited to have the last speaker for this session, Dr. Michelle Regulacio, or Shay, is a Balik scientist. Actually, she has been out of the country in the US and also in Singapore for the past decade. She just came back a couple of years ago, and she's now a faculty at the Institute of Chemistry at UP Diliman. Shay got her bachelor's from UPLB, and her PhD in chemistry from Georgetown University. And she postdoced at Princeton, and she worked at A-Star in Singapore for many, many years. She specializes in, Shay is a synthetic nanomaterial scientist. So she specializes in tuning the different parameters of nanomaterials to get intended purposes in biomedicine, intended applications in environmental science, etc. So she'll be talking about that. Her talk will be on a composition tuning of nanostructured multinary semiconductors in solution. Shay, take it away for the last part. Shay here? I think you're on mute.
Hi. Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Kuya Gani, for that kind introduction. Allow me to share my screen. So, okay. So, good morning, everyone. I'll try to make this short and simple since it's really lunchtime. So my presentation for today would be on how to tune the composition of multinary semiconductor nanostructures in solution. So my field is different from our previous speakers since I'm into inorganic chemistry and I work specifically on inorganic nanomaterials. First, let me give you a brief introduction on semiconductor nanocrystals. So when you say nanocrystal, nanoparticle, nanostructure, or nanomaterial, so it's all about the size, and as the prefix tells us, nano, so they are very tiny or small particles. So I'm showing you here at the center. Here's your pointer. Here is an image of a sample that contains zinc cadmium selenide nanocrystals, which are 7 nanometers in size. So why do we study this material? So now, the research for semiconductor nanocrystals is basically based on their outstanding optical properties. So when the semiconductors are in the nanometer size range, they exhibit properties that are not observable in the bulk counterparts or in the bulk solid. So since they have excellent optical properties, this enables their use in technological applications that require efficient absorption and emission of light. So as an example, since they can emit light effectively, they can be used as materials for light-emitting diodes in optoelectronic applications. So shown here are differently colored nanocrystals, which we can use for LEDs. So we can also use them in the biomedical field since emissive particles can be used to image cells. So here, the particles that are used are red emissive quantum dots. Now, since they can absorb light also, so strong absorption of light, it enables their use for energy conversion applications. So an example is in solar cells or photovoltaics, wherein the material could absorb solar light and convert it into electrical energy. So lastly, so my last example would be their use in catalysis. So in particular, photocatalysis. So they would absorb light, and after absorption, the electrons and holes of the semiconductors will separate, and now the free carriers can be used to catalyze important reactions. So in this example, the electron can be used to reduce water to hydrogen. So when we talk about semiconductor, it's their energy gap or band gap, which is abbreviated as EG, that determines their properties. So here I'm showing you a schematic illustration of a semiconductor band structure, wherein you have the valence band at the bottom and the conduction band above. So the one that's in between, the space in between these two bands is what we call the band gap. So now when a semiconductor absorbs light, the electron from the valence band will jump to the conduction band. So that's the process of absorption. Now, after some time, the electron will go back to the valence band, and by doing so, it will emit light. So that's emission. So since the electrons have to cross the band gap in absorbing and emitting light, so there's this equation which relates the band gap to the wavelength of light that the semiconductor can absorb or emit. So now, if we are able to control the width of the band gap, then we would be able to tune the color or the wavelength of light that can be emitted or absorbed by our semiconductor nanocrystals. So you can tune the band gap such that you can, the semiconductor nanocrystals can absorb or emit light that spans the whole visible spectral range or even beyond this. So to do that, so the most popular way is to tune or control the size of the nanocrystals because at the nanometer size regime, there's what we call the quantum confinement effect. So quantum confinement effect simply means that as you decrease the size of the nanoparticles, the band gap will widen. So shown here as an example is for cadmium selenide nanocrystals. So it has been reported that when you decrease the size, the crystal size from 8 to 2 nanometers, the band gap increases from 1.9 to 2.7 electron volts. And since the wavelength of light, again, is dependent on the band gap, you can have different colors of emission. So shown here, so we have different vials of cadmium selenide nanocrystals. So they have a different emission color just because they have different sizes. So, but for my talk, the method that I'm going to present to tune the band gap is composition tuning. So aside from size tuning, we can change the composition of the semiconductor. And we do that by alloying. So when we alloy two semiconductors, it's like alloying two metals. So you form a homogeneous or a solid solution of the two materials. So for example, cadmium sulfide and cadmium selenide are two different semiconductors. So when you create an alloy, you create the cadmium sulfide selenide semiconductor. And since these two semiconductors have different band gaps, so if it's pure cadmium selenide, it's 1.9, pure cadmium sulfide, it's 2.4. Then as you change the mole fraction of sulfur or selenium in your alloy, you also change the energy gap from 1.9 to 2.4 electron volts and going from the mole fraction of sulfur from 0 to 1. So here, so we have different colors of emission again. So these are cadmium sulfide selenide nanocrystals, and all of them have the same size. All of them are 6 nanometers in size. But the difference now is that they have varying composition. So you change the mole fraction of your sulfur or your selenium content. Okay. So for my examples here, so these are cadmium-containing semiconductors because in nanomaterials research, cadmium chalcogenides are like the king because they're the ones that are being extensively studied for nanomaterials application since they have really outstanding properties. But the major drawback in using these compounds is that they contain cadmium, which we all know is a toxic element. So my focus is on semiconductors that don't contain toxic elements such as cadmium or lead. So I've been working on multinary semiconductors for the past decade. And here are just some of the images of multinary semiconductor nanocrystals that I have synthesized over the years. So as you can see here, they can have different compositions, different sizes, and aside from that, you can have different shapes or morphologies. And according to their morphology, you can actually name your nanocrystal. Like for example, these ones can be called as nanobullets since they're bullet shaped. So these ones are rod-like nanocrystals, which we call nanorods. So these ones, we named them as nanotadpoles. So for multinary semiconductors, again, the difference from binary one, so cadmium sulfide is a binary semiconductor because it only has 2 element components in it and 1 metal. So if you have multinary semiconductors, you have more than 2 elements and more than 1 metal. Such as in the case of copper gallium sulfide, you have copper and gallium as your metal as opposed to just cadmium and cadmium sulfide. So there's an added challenge in synthesizing multinary semiconductor nanocrystals because you have more elements that should merge or combine to form your desired compound. So especially as the number of elements increases, like for example, in the case of copper zinc tin sulfide, you have 4 components. And in synthesizing these materials, you can have many secondary phases that can form. So for example, you can form zinc sulfide, copper sulfide, tin sulfide, or copper tin sulfide. So it's important that you choose your parameters judiciously so that you can get phase pure compounds. So my synthesis is always done in solution. So I usually use the colloidal chemical method. So in this method, so what I'm showing you is an example of synthesis of copper indium sulfide nanocrystals. So we begin at room temperature. You just mix the precursors. So precursors meaning the sources of your elements. So we need copper, indium, and sulfur. So I'm using this. I have chosen these precursors. These are dithiocarbamate complexes. So if I want to make sulfides, this is always my choice of precursors because in these complexes, they already have sulfur-containing ligands. So instead of having 3 precursors, since we have copper, indium, and sulfur, I can just use 2 precursors in which there's already sulfur in the complexes. So these are my favorite precursors. Actually, I've been using this since my grad school days at Georgetown. So here, it's also important to choose your solvent. So here I'm using a mixture of these 3 solvents, the decanthiol, oleic acid, and octadecane. So in choosing the solvents, first you have to consider the reaction temperature. So for this compound to form, I need to have a high temperature, so above 200. So since I need to heat it up at 250 degrees Celsius, I need high boiling solvents. So these solvents have boiling points that are around 300 degrees Celsius. And also, it's more of a trial and error on how to choose the mixture. So you have many trials of the synthesis until you get that pure phase compound, which is monodispersed and has good quality. So mix them all at room temperature and then heat it up to your desired temperature, 250 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, the precursors will decompose and then you'll nucleate your nanoparticles or nanocrystals. If you keep it at that temperature, right, at an elevated temperature for some time, in this case 1 hour, then you'll allow the nanocrystals to grow to your desired size. Okay. So I use that method in synthesizing my alloyed zinc sulfide, copper indium sulfide nanorods. So here, so I have 2 semiconductors that form the alloys, zinc sulfide and copper indium sulfide. So I use this as my precursors and this as my solvent system. So I heated it up at 250 at 1 hour and got these rod-shaped nanocrystals. So again, we want to tune the optical properties and we do that by tuning the band gap. So we change the ratio of zinc sulfide to copper indium sulfide. So when you do that in your experiment, so if you want 1:1 ratio of zinc sulfide to copper indium sulfide, then you use 1:1:1 ratio of your metal dithiocarbamate precursors. So by changing the ratio, as you can show in this absorption spectra, so we were able to tune the absorption edge. So meaning that the nanorods of different compositions can absorb light at different wavelengths. So unfortunately for these nanorods, since they are highly elongated in shape, they don't emit light, but they can absorb light effectively as seen in this absorption spectra. So for this particular sample, we use this as photocatalyst. So our reaction is the generation of hydrogen from water. So as shown in this graph, if you only have copper indium sulfide, so without the zinc sulfide in it, so the amount of hydrogen produced is almost negligible. So it's almost 0 hydrogen. But when you form the alloy, so you form the zinc sulfide, copper indium sulfide alloy, you see a photocatalytic activity of the sample. So meaning that in forming the alloy, you were able to manipulate the band structure such that it becomes suitable for this particular reaction. So here we use the 10:1 ratio because among all the ratios, this gave us the highest photocatalytic activity. But we weren't content with that, so we wanted to improve the activity more. So what we tried to do is we decorated. So these are nanorods, right? So we decorated our nanorods with conducting domains. So you can use a metal or conducting semiconductors. So palladium sulfide is an example. Then for metals here, I used platinum. So when we decorated the semiconductor nanocrystal with conductance domains, as you can see here, we were able to improve the activity. And the reason for this is that because, so as I've mentioned in my introduction, so you want the charge carriers to be separated after light absorption. So you want the electrons to move away from the holes. So the electrons now, if there are conducting domains, then they would automatically move towards those domains. And you can use them now for the reaction that you want. So here, we need to use the electrons to reduce water to hydrogen. So another example of alloyed semiconductor nanocrystals, in this case, we alloyed zinc sulfide with silver indium sulfide. Okay. So here, what we change is not the ratio between the two semiconductors. So because we found that to get an emissive nanocrystal in this material, it should be silver deficient. So what we've modified here is the ratio of silver to indium. So we have different silver to indium ratio, in which in all of these samples, it's silver deficient. And since our target for these quantum dots, since we want them to be emissive, we want to use them in biomedical applications. So the synthesis, we designed it in such a way that the nanoparticles should be dispersible in water for it to be biocompatible. So here, what we used as the precursors are zinc, the nitrate salts of the metals, and then sodium sulfide as the sulfur source. So we want water as the solvent, so you can just conduct the experiment at 100 degrees Celsius. So we coated the surface of our nanoparticles with surfactants that would make them highly dispersible in water. So after 2 hours, we get these different nanoparticles with different compositions. So as you can see, we were able to get different colors of emission. So green, yellow, orange, and red. So this is just the fluorescent spectra of our quantum dots or nanoparticles. So as I've said, so we wanted to test its utility for biological application. So we sent our samples to our collaborators in the biomedical field. So we asked them to see if our samples, if our quantum dots could image cells. But what they've done is that they tried to label baculoviral vectors with the emissive quantum dots. So here, fortunately, the vectors have a protein component which are positively charged. And then our quantum dots are coated with anionic surfactants. So just through electrostatic interactions, by just mixing the vectors with the quantum dots, we were able to bind our quantum dots onto the charged protein of the vectors. And then incubate them with HeLa cells to see if they would be able to enter the cells. So as you can see here, the fluorescence image, if it's just the HeLa cells and the quantum dots, you don't see the emission. But if you have the HeLa cells with the labeled vectors, you see the orange emission. So we use the orange emitting quantum dots for these experiments. So this tells us that the quantum dots, when we label the vector with their quantum dots, it can efficiently enter the cell, and it can be used potentially to monitor the expression of genes in the cells. Okay, so another method in synthesizing nanostructures in solution is what we call the solvothermal synthesis. So it can be called hydrothermal synthesis only if the solvent is water. So in the synthetic method, so again, you have your precursor solution, so the source of your elements, and then your chosen solvent, you mix them in a Teflon cup, seal it in an autoclave, and then heat it up in the oven at your desired temperature and time. So in this case, 200 degrees Celsius for 16 hours gave us copper antimony sulfide nanotetrahedrons. So copper antimony sulfide is my desired material here. But the problem with synthesizing this compound is that there are actually 3 copper antimony sulfide bases in which the ratio of copper to antimony is 3:1. Okay, so first, let's just call them by their mineral name. So we have this compound, which is famatinite. So you have copper 3, antimony 1, so sulfur 4. Then the tetrahedrite, my desired material, also has 3:1 ratio. And another one is kinnarite. So all of them are 3:1. So you can't use the technique in which you just vary the ratio of the precursors that you use. Because if you use the 3:1 ratio of these precursors, then you can have a mixture of phases, or you can favor the formation of one over the other. So what I've tested is that I vary the solvents that I use in the synthesis. So I found that when I use pure olillamine as my solvent, I can get pure famatinite. Then if I mixed olillamine with dodecaine thiol, so B, and then heat it up, that's when I got the tetrahedrite nanocrystals. But if you only have pure dodecaine thiol, it will give you mixed phases, so a mixture of skinnarite and tetrahedrite. So here, varying the solvent environment is crucial or critical to the formation of your desired material. So I'm trying to find out why I got the material using those solvents. So I studied the formation mechanism, and I've learned that at the early stages of reaction, like when it's not yet at 200 degrees Celsius, so at 100, around 100 degrees Celsius, the nanocrystals that I obtained are just copper sulfide. So antimony is not yet incorporated. And in those three solvent systems, the ratio of copper to sulfur are different. So I'm getting different copper sulfide phases depending on the reducing ability of the solvent that I use. And based on the seeds, the starting copper sulfide material, so that's how I got the different copper antimony sulfide phases. So it depends on the copper sulfur ratio on the starting copper sulfide materials. So as I've said, my target was tetrahedrite. And it's because tetrahedrite is known to absorb near-infrared light efficiently. And I want to try to use these compounds for photothermal drug delivery, so photothermal applications. And fortunately, when I obtained the TEM image of the nanocrystals, so they are tetrahedron in shape, and they're porous. So that's important if my target application is drug delivery, because the voids in the porous nanocrystals would be able to encapsulate the drug molecule. So in this case, I used doxorubicin, or dox, which is an anti-cancer drug. Okay, so as I've said, I want to use it because of its photothermal activity. So when you say photothermal, you're converting photon energy or photons into thermal energy or heat. So it's light to heat conversion. So to test its photothermal activity, so it's shown in this graph. If you only have water and irradiate it, so you shine near infrared light, as you can see here, the increase in temperature is not significant. But if you add the nanocrystals, so the copper antimony sulfide nanocrystals in water, and as you increase the concentration of the tetrahedrite, you see that there's a raise in temperature, and it increases with increasing concentration of the nanocrystals. So this tells us that they are indeed photothermally active. So they can convert near infrared light to heat. So how do we use that for drug delivery applications? So we have this drug profile curve, drug release profile, in which when you shine the solution, dispersion of nanocrystals in a DOX solution. So we loaded the DOX first in the nanocrystals, and we studied how it releases DOX when we have NIR laser on or off. So with the laser on, so you're shining it with your infrared light, we see that the release of drug is faster. So when we turn it off, it will be slower, and then turn it on again, so you increase the release of drugs. So by heating or by irradiating the nanocrystals, it generates heat and you get a faster release of the DOX. So here from this experiment, we concluded that you can manipulate or control the release of the loaded drug just by regulating it using near-infrared induced heating. Okay. So in summary, so I have discussed about multinary semiconductors. These are emerging materials that have properties that can be tuned at the nanoscale. And these are my chosen materials because they're environmentally benign, since they don't have cadmium or lead or mercury in it. So you can tune the composition of the nanocrystals by just simply altering certain experimental parameters, such as your precursor ratio or your nature of coordinating solvents. And also, I have shown that we can also decorate the nanocrystals with other domains to form hybrid nanostructures also in solution. And lastly, so it has a variety of potential applications depending on the properties of your material. So if it's responsive to visible light, you can use it as visible light induced photocatalyst. Then if it's emissive, you can use it as fluorescent materials for biological labeling or imaging. Then if they absorb near infrared light, then they can be used for photothermal applications. So I'd like to acknowledge my former colleagues at A-Star who worked with me in the work that I've presented. And yeah, I thank all of you for listening to my talk. I hope you're not hungry yet.
Thank you, Shay. Actually, we still have more than 300 participants signed in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know how much is signed in on YouTube, Jeff.
It's 40 plus, sir. So we have like we have a total of about like 370.
Okay, cool.
Participants. Yeah. So they stayed in. They stayed on.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any questions on YouTube, Jeff?
So there are no questions from the comment box, but I do have questions. I do have a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, Ma'am Shay, thank you so much for the talk. So, it's actually very impressive to see, like these platform synthetic techniques being used to access different families of materials with fairly good control of compositions and of structures as well. So I was just like wondering if you could make a comment on the generality of this technique, particularly perhaps like in the synthesis of mixed metal oxides or multinary oxides.
Yeah. So yeah, solution phase synthesis can also be used for multinary oxides actually. And my reason for choosing solution phase synthesis is because if you do the synthesis at the solid state, it would require very high temperature conditions, like greater than 500 degrees Celsius. So also, it would be difficult to control the morphology and the size when you do it in the solid state. So as I've said, the solvent plays an important role in the nanocrystal synthesis. So solution phase technique is advantageous when it comes to that.
Okay. And do you also have plans of, perhaps like this is like a fairly leading question and comment that I'm gonna be asking, but are there plans to actually leverage these types of materials for perhaps like making catalytic systems that can be applied for more bulk type chemical transformations?
These are semiconductors, but for chemical transformations, it's usually metal nanocrystals. So I'm also working on that, like specifically gold nanomaterials, but like that's another topic. But yeah, you can use nanomaterials for catalysis.
Yeah, because I also saw your I think like terminus decorated nanorods, right? Like where I think you were able to specifically deposit or at least like anchor like some of your late transition metal or your I think palladium or platinum sites at the very end.
Yeah.
Yes, those are actually fairly interesting materials. I was just quite curious as to where you see those materials go. So
yeah, so for that you don't need a hybrid if you only want the catalytic functionality. So you can just use the metal nanocrystals.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Shay. There's a question here from the Q&A section. So I'm reading it. It was mentioned that the band gap can be modified by tuning either the particle size or the composition. How is one method advantageous over the other, especially in terms of synthesis and its application?
Okay. The advantage of tuning the composition is that because depending on the material, so it's not, my example for size tuning is cadmium selenide. So you tune the emission color by just changing the size from 8 to 2 nanometers. But for other semiconductors, like for example, the multinary semiconductors, it's difficult to get the size to 2 nanometers, so that low. So in that case, you won't get the emission color that you want when you have the 2 nanometer size nanocrystals. So that's why, aside from side tuning, then you can tune the composition, just tune the composition of the semiconductor.
There's a question from YouTube, if I may. It's from Fa Santa Fe. She said, thank you for the informative lecture. So her question is that, is it possible to change the size of nanocrystals if it is already nucleated or heated to a certain temperature?
To increase the size, yes. Yeah, but you, if you already have that size at that temperature, then it would be difficult to have a size smaller than that using the same reaction mixture. So you have to synthesize again with different parameters.
How about the shape, Ma'am Shay? Are there certain metastable structures that you can access, within a certain temperature regime, or
For the shape, it's more of your choice of ligands, because those ligands, they bind to specific crystal facets of your crystal, of the nanocrystal. So if they bind to certain facets, then they would inhibit growth of those facets. So those facets that have no ligands capping it, or has less ligands capping it, then those facets would grow. So in the case of the nanorods, so it's growing in one dimension. It's because the planes of that dimension is poorly capped as compared to the other facets.
Yeah, I'm quite curious. How mature is our understanding in terms of like the nucleation mechanisms, right? Of some of these types of materials. I mean, yeah, is it something that is fairly mature already, or is it something that it's quite mature in certain areas, for certain types of materials, but not really for others?
There are studies already on how these nanocrystals nucleate. So it's governed by several factors. So you have what they call the critical size limit. So that's why it's important to like adjust your parameters depending on what you want or on what your desired material is.
Thank you.
So I guess that's it. No more questions? Oh, Ma'am, Dr. Giselle Concepcion raised her hand. Ma'am?
Hey, Ma'am Giselle.
Hi, Shay. It's so nice to listen to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, po.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in this because we actually have a very potent anti-cancer drug, which we published in combination with doxorubicin sometime last year. Anyway, Shay, so this nanocrystal is being developed, say, for IV or for oral? And that's my first question. Or any other mode of introduction? And then is it supposed to be monitored through some instrument? That's so because you want to deliver it with the drug to the tumor site, right?
Yes.
So then you introduce it through IV or say orally, and then will it just naturally seek out the tumor site if there's no targeting?
Okay.
Or are you going to monitor it through some instrument? Okay. So my third question is, does it accumulate in the kidney or the liver? So you were talking about nucleation, but in vivo, what would be some of the other factors to consider, say accumulation?
Okay.
You.
Yes. The results that I presented for tetrahedrite is like very preliminary. So we just wanted to test the photothermal activity. But if we want to use it now, like for biomedical application, we have to consider many factors versus the cytotoxicity. So actually for this talk, since I focused on semiconductors, for the tetrahedrite, we haven't done any in vitro or in vivo studies or even cytotoxicity assay. But I have like another material, which is gold. So we have more data on gold nanoparticles for biomedical application. So in that case, since gold is known to be biocompatible and it's very easy to functionalize the surface of gold nanoparticles. So you could functionalize the surface such that the molecules could bind to your target molecules. So that's first. And then regarding renal clearance, or because we want these nanoparticles to be cleared, right, from the body after using it. So what we want is to make the particles as small as possible. It should be less than 3 nanometers. But in cases like, for example, in the tetrahedrite, it's quite big. I think it's around 40 nanometers. So if it depends on how we, the mechanism of formation for the nanocrystal. So we made it porous such that it's made up of smaller particles that just have aggregated. So what we wanted to do for that is that you can have a way for the nanoparticles, for those aggregation to disintegrate and remove it from the body. So again, that's for our future work. What else was your question, ma'am? Did I answer everything? Or the mode of for the gold nanocrystals that we studied for biomedical applications, we injected it intratumorally. So it was done via injection in mice. And then since gold, again, is easy to functionalize, so if you want targeted applications, so we have a paper that we're currently writing actually, in which we created a composite of gold with a magnetic coating. So in that case, you will be able to have like a smart drug delivery system by using magnetic field to direct your nanoparticles to the site.
Thanks a lot, Shay. Thanks.
Thank you po, ma'am.
So thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am, for ending this webinar, for asking your question. So let me just summarize all the talks that were presented today. So let me just share again the screen. Okay, so can you see this? So I just would like to give a summary of all the talks that were given this morning. So Dr. Todd Lawrence, is it shared?
No, it's not.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing it now.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to give a quick recap. So Dr. Todd Lowry's seminar showed us how antibody targets a unique glycan structure that is specific to the Mycobacterium tuberculosis complex and showed no cross-reactivity with fast-growing mycobacteria or other bacteria. And this study provided evidence that improved assay methods and reagents lead to increased diagnostic accuracy with the goal of developing a sensitive and specific novel assay. And in Dr. Hans Lin's seminar, he provided information of how disaccharides are being synthesized in trying to come up with a selective inhibitor of galectin-3. And galectin-3 is considered as a potential therapeutic agent target of several diseases, such as breast and ovarian cancer. And you've seen also in his seminar how they made use of resolved X-ray complex structures where they were able to depict the SAR, or structure activity relationship, to provide useful information to obtain potent and selective inhibitors of galectin. And when we move on to the seminars of the Filipino scientists, Dr. Roy Gerona's seminar highlighted the combined use of organic chemistry and analytical methods, development, and instrumentation, where his team can play as chemical detectives in various NPS outbreaks in the United States. And finally, due to his collaboration with UP Manila, targeted workflows are being transferred and made accessible to the Philippines through the UP Drugs of Abuse Research Laboratory. And Dr. Rodel Barrientos shared how active immunization is being explored as a potential therapeutic against opioid overdose epidemic. He discussed the synthesis, design, formulation, characterization, and preclinical testing of the vaccine Immunogen against fentanyl and heroin. So the first 4 seminars started by discussing complex glycans to simpler glycans, and then went on to small molecules and showed how these compounds are being used in the field of diagnostics, drug discovery, and therapeutics. But Dr. Michelle Regulacio, on the other hand, showed another field of chemistry, and this is the nanotechnology, where she focused on the different solution-based synthetic strategies that can be used in the preparation of high-quality composition tunable nanocrystals of multinary sulfide semiconductors. She also presented their potential utility in the areas of biomedicine and photocatalysis. Again, I would like to thank all the participants who attended this parallel session. We are proud to say that we have more than 700 attendees, and true to the conference's theme, this webinar serve the theme, which is an outreach to Philippine regions. Thank you to our speakers for sharing their knowledge and expertise. Let us give them a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much. Although Todd and Hans already left, thank you, Roy, Rodel, and Shay. And also would like to thank the co-hosts, Dr. Ruel Nacario, Dr. Gani Padulina, and Dr. Jeff Bunkuin for acting as the moderators this morning. And can we stop share? And also I would like to mention my student, Mr. Michael Flores, who he's an excellent artist, and he was the one who prepared all the flyers for the advertisement. And then I also would like to thank the UPLB Information Technology Center, especially Mr. John Eric Dow, who has been with us since the preparation of this webinar. Thank you, everyone. And can we have a group picture? Can we, may I request the speakers and the panelists and some participants, especially Mom Giselle, if you can join us. And then I will ask my daughter to help me, Izzy, to help me take the picture of the panelists and our other participants. Sir John, are you there? How? Gallery? Maybe gallery. Oh, there. Okay. Okay. Mom Giselle, are you there? Can you please join us? Okay. It's anyway. All right. So, Roy, smile.
I don't smile.
Yes. Hi, Mom Giselle. Yes. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Everybody's asking if we can provide, what do you call that? Certificate, e-certificate. Is it possible, Ma'am Giselle?
Yes, we already gave you the template for the certificate.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you're going to issue it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
all right.
My signature already.
Okay.
Thank you, Gladys. Congratulations. Did you say 700?
Yes po.
Amazing. You're champion so far. Wow. Unbelievable. That's
Yes,
fantastic.
it's
Brings the
because
whole
of the
biochem
there's
community. Yeah,
sorry
together.
po. Sorry po. It's
It
because
brings
of
the biochem and chem community together.
yeah.
Yeah, you should do it again.
Yeah, sure. We have other speakers. We're gonna invite
Yes,
other speakers. And
fantastic.
yes, maraming salamat po, ma'am.
Congratulations.
And then I would like to introduce to you Dr. Roy Herona.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I know him. I've met him because
yes,
I visited, a few times. UC San Francisco. Dr. Herona, I don't know if you remember me, Gisela Concepcion. I was
Yes, of course.
AA then.
Yeah.
Then Picari PAG. So we visited you. Yes, I have heard you speak before. Congratulations.
Thank you. And
he's
thanks
one of
for
the nominees. I nominated him as a member.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that the project with UP Manila is going well, Dr. Herona. So congratulations. And
yeah, it is. Although
keep
we're
helping
having
us.
some hiccups with
Keep
COVID-19.
helping us. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, mahirap pero mangyayari din. Nangyayari.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So we're gonna send you the evaluation link, and then after that, we will get your email, and then we can send the e-certificates. Please send us an email in the Zoom invitation. I have my email address there. Please contact me, and I will be able to provide the e-certificate. And of course, Dr. Rodel Barrientos' mom, Giselle, he's an associate member now, and we would like to nominate him to be a full member.
Rodel, fantastic. You know, I missed your talk in the PASO webinar, and it was not on YouTube, right? I failed to because I was so busy with this 48 pumps. So glad I got half of your talk here. Congratulations. So, hindi ko na masyadong maintindihan kung ano yung, pero wow, kasi we're in the area of, opioid, non-opioid targeting for pain, Rodel. So we're working on CONOD and peptides for pain. We have that hot plate model as well. So learned a lot from your talk, Rodel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanda. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too, Rodel. Thank you.
And then, ma'am, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Jeff Bunkuin. He is the founder of this viral Filipino Science Hub in FB. That's the reason why we have a lot of attendees. Okay, so he posted it, and there were a lot of registrants because of that.
So he is in SD. He is, right?
He is in Texas, in Houston. He is connected with Exxon.
I'm actually from the petrochemical industries. I'm from the research organization of ExxonMobil, chemical company. So yeah, I was invited by Ate Gladys po to help facilitate like this webinar series. And so yeah, we actually promoted the event on an online platform that we have actually been using to reach out to high school teachers and college teachers in the STEM track. So we've been so far reaching educators from all over the country. So anytime that you have an event, feel free to reach out to us. But we'd be glad to help you promote those events and bridge the connection between our educators and students, both at the high school and college levels, and with your advocacies and activities.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. This is not just a Filipino community. It's international, your hub. Okay, so is your hub viral? So the viral just has happened to be viral.
Yeah, but it went viral. When the world went lockdown, essentially, because we wanted to support our high school teachers by providing them with some online resources that they can use for the new mode of teaching. So it just so happened that it went viral. So now we're not that big yet. We're about we're about like 20,000. We have about 20,000 followers over Facebook, but it just keeps growing on a steady pace. And about 80 to 90% of our followers are actually teachers, both at the high school and college level. So we can really reach quite far and wide demographic wise. So yun po. And we're trying to extend over the Filipino student demographic as well po. Pero we're mostly volunteers po. So kung sino man po yung gusto mag-mentor dyan ng mga Filipino scientists and educators, please reach out to us po. Kasi yung mga teachers po natin, kailangan po nila lahat ng tulong at na-appreciate po nila lahat ng tulong. And what we're also trying to bring to them are stories of aspirational Filipino scientists and subject matter experts in the STEM areas. So we're doing features of Filipino scientists po. So since kayo ma'am ang medyo merong network with them, we would really appreciate if you could also bring your squad over and bring stories of aspirations and have inspirational figures para po sa ating mga bata. Para meron po tayong stronger culture of research and science in the future.
That's really great.
Okay. Yeah. Pero hindi ako kakandidatong politiko.
Pero aligned yung ating goal sa PASE.
Opo, I'm not a member yet po. Ay, pinapaano po ako ni Ate Gladys.
You're mute, ma'am. Ma'am, you're mute po.
Yeah, Gladys, and I wanted to say aligned yung ating goal sa PASE at yung iyong hub, no? So, ang unang contribution namin, yung Zoom recordings nitong mga 30 parallel sessions on the whole range of topics. You can use them all, no? We will be posting them in our website. Okay? So, lahat teaching materials na to, lahat itong mga ating mga talks.
Yep, and that would be good. We also have a YouTube channel po, which is also gaining some significant following as well. So definitely marami po yung malawak po ang maaabot ng pong mga contents na yan. Kasi kailangan po talaga nila ngayon na maging updated po sa kung ano po ba yung ginagawa ng mga modern day Filipino scientists. So the likes of us in generation po namin ngayon na kami po yung medyo nandun na sa forefront ngayon, we benefited from the stories of Sir Pado and Ma'am Pada. Yung compared to Sir Gani. So, it will be great if we can bring yung pong fresh stories pa rin po, because we were mentored, we were produced by their generation. So it's time to move forward po.
So yesterday we gave Sir Pado the honorary membership award, and when I told him that he is one of my mentors because after graduating from UP Diliman Chemistry, he recruited me to teach in UP Los Baños Chemistry. So he's my first employer. So I told the group or the audience that I witnessed how Sir Pado and Sir Pada, were teaching chemistry because I team taught with them in the lab.
I never really experienced Ma'am Pada and Sir Pado po personally, but I would say that I'm kind of like an academic grandchild of him because through my PhD, through my bachelor's degree advisor. So lahat po tayo ay influensyado ng mga giants po natin noon. So yun po. Sana po mas marami pang mga bata.
Ang laki ng impact ng INTAPS na tinayo ni Dr. Padolina. Kaya, UP Los Baños is for me a very, very great resource of talent. Ang dami sa outstanding mga UPLB. Okay?
Yeah, ma'am. So anytime po that you have advocacies that need promotion, we can our platform po is welcome. You're always welcome.
Gladys. Of course, it to Gladys and Ruel and Gani.
Yes.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Merong tinatawag nating amplification effect, Gladys, right?
Yes.
Merong cascading effects. Sige.
Thank you po.
So
we can use your PhilSci Hub channel. We can doon sa mga yung mga susunod na mga parallel sessions. And have more participants, Ma'am Giselle.
Pero Gladys, ito lang 40th APAMS na to. Lahat ng mga materials dyan, yung mga Zoom recordings natin, sana i-submit mo yung Zoom recordings na
sure, ma'am.
Ito po sa amin, tapos ilalatag po natin siya.
Oo, nakapost sa website natin lahat yan. 48
yes po.
Ng Zoom record. Nako, magagamit mo yung libre. So,
maraming salamat po.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Ayan, kumonti na po. Umalis na sila from 700 to 99 na lang. But still.
I think 262 po ate.
262.
262.
Out of 61. 260.
It's possible, Gladys, di ba? Sabi ng iba, hindi ka. Wow! Wow, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible talaga.
We can actually invite more speakers, ma'am. We can do this during regular semester. We can invite speakers.
Yeah. Pwede niyong gamitin yung teaching materials niyo.
Exactly.
Sa regular or online courses.
Yes po.
All right.
Very nice, ma'am. Ang ganda ng idea niyo po. Thank you very much for this.
For all of you to improve, to use and to enhance, improve further. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
On behalf of PAASE, we now end this session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ingat po kayo lahat.
Bye.
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 Roy?
Thank you.
Roy?
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Gladys.
pwede ka bang mag-meet, pwede kami makapag-meet sa'yo sa Friday?